The letter came in the brittle days after frostfall, ink smeared from transit, like tears shed too long in a pocket. It bore no address on the return, just her name, Clara, with a county scrawl from some stretch of West Texas no one had bothered to map properly. The postmaster hadn't wanted to deliver it. "Come from out that dust, Joline. No good folk out there," he said, placing it on her table like a dead rat. She unfolded it anyway, because hope made beggars of all kinds, and she had long since left pride behind. The reply was short, a man's hand clipped and tight. "Miss Clara, I have no further need for a wife. The arrangement is void. Do not write again." No signature. Not even the name she'd memorized from months of letters, words that once sounded like the promise of shelter, of firelight and soil beneath her hands. Marshall Cullen, 42, landowner, widower, one child, estranged. Looking for a woman of quiet nature, must not mind hardship, must know animals, marriage likely. She had met every word. Had scrubbed floors in the Boston slums until her hands split and froze, had nursed tubercular girls dying on straw pallets while the nuns told her to keep praying. She'd not minded hardship. She, grown inside it. And now even that small chance had been taken, without reason, without word. Clara stared at the letter until the edge of it curled from the heat of the stove. Then she folded it with the delicacy of handling a curse. Her money was gone. Her boarding room was paid only through Saturday. She had no kin left since her sister's child died in the fever house and her mother hanged herself beside the river 2 summers past. She had no one. Except a man who'd promised her something, then decided she was nothing. Clara left Boston that night with the last of her coins and a borrowed satchel. She said nothing to the landlady. She boarded the westbound train under a false name, shoes wet from snowmelt, the cold already working under her skin. What she sought wasn't just a husband, it was proof she could not be cast off so easily. That a woman without a man still had teeth, still had her knees beneath her, her mind sharp like flint waiting for the right strike. Texas would not know her, not at first, but she would make it remember her. Dustjo County was an expanse of bone-dry earth, where wind cut the hills like a knife, and the sun punished every shadow. She stepped off the train in a skirt too thin for grit country, the hem already laced with dust. The station was little more than a nailed-up shack with a crooked sign. No one came to meet her. Of course not. There was no welcome for the cast-off. Clara walked the 5 miles to the Cullen Ranch. She carried her satchel like a coffin, every step a choice. Men passed on horseback, none offering help, some spitting chew into the dirt, others watching her like something caught in wire. By dusk her feet were blistered, her cheeks burned raw. But the house stood before her at last, large, squat, and solitary, backed against a ridge of black rock. She could hear cattle lowing somewhere behind it, the clank of a gate. A lantern glowed in one window only, no signs of family. No wife. She stood there, fists clenched, long enough to taste her own bile. Then she stepped forward and knocked once, hard. A man answered, broad-shouldered, with a beard near to gray and eyes the color of floodwater. He looked at her as if she were something brought in on a storm. "I told you not to come," he said. "I didn't ask what you told me," Clara said, her voice flat. "I came to marry you, like you promised. I've got no one left." His expression didn't shift, just that long, heavy silence, like he was measuring what she was made of. "You were a contract," he said. "I broke it, that's law. I owe you nothing. And I owe the world nothing, but here I am." He looked past her like expecting someone else to claim her, but the road was empty, only dust behind her and more ahead. "Please," she said. The word came soft. Too soft for all she'd endured. "Please, I won't beg again." He didn't move, then after a moment stepped aside. 3 days, he said. You eat, you rest, then you go. She walked in. Behind her, the door shut with the sound of something final. Like a gate closing behind the last of a herd. She did not know it yet, but dust would not let her leave clean. Nor would the past. She had come for a name. She would earn it in blood. The inside of the Cullen house smelled of old wood, horse grease, and tobacco. The floor was swept but worn down to raw plank in places, and a loaded rifle leaned by the hearth like a warning. Clara took it all in without flinching. She slept in worse, eaten in worse. This was a place shaped by labor and silence, and she knew how to live in both. Marshal Cullen didn't speak again that night. He pointed to a room at the back, a small one with a rope-strung cot and a basin. She set her satchel down without complaint. Her hands trembled as she unlaced her boots, but she hid them in her skirts. When morning came, she woke early, beat him to the stove, and had coffee boiling before he stirred. She knew how to stay useful, how to slip into a man's life without asking permission. She swept the porch, hauled kindling, mended the ripped saddle strap she found by the tack bench. She asked nothing, spoke little, but she watched. He was a man built by solitude. He tended to his ranch like a soldier, with little waist and no room for softness. She caught his eyes on her once, when she was feeding the dogs with half-burned stew, and in them she saw a deep tiredness. The kind that came from burying too many. On the second day she found the grave. It was behind the house, tucked against a mesquite, marked with a single iron cross. No name, no flowers, just the wind, kicking up sand and memory. Clara knelt beside it and brushed the dirt from the base. The soil here was hard-packed, cruel. Whatever lay beneath it had been put there with calloused hands. That night she asked over supper, "Was it your wife?" He didn't answer at first. Just chewed the last of his bread and stared at the fire. "My daughter," he said finally. "She came back broken, from back east, died the winter after." Clara didn't press. She could feel the edge of grief in him like a knife under skin. "I'm sorry," she said, because it was the only honest thing she could offer. He didn't look up. "You can leave tomorrow. The supply wagon runs north. You can ride it out." "I won't," she said. "Not until you say you never meant to marry me." He set his tin cup down hard enough it cracked. "I wrote that. You read it. You wrote you didn't need a wife. That's not the same." He stood then, sharp, like a man used to settling things with his hands. But he didn't reach for her, just turned toward the window where the night stretched black and endless. "You don't know what kind of place this is," he said, "what kind of man I am." "I know you're a man who once wanted something better," she said. "And that maybe you still do." He said nothing more and she didn't push. But that night she didn't sleep in the cot. She took a blanket out to the porch and lay there, listening to coyotes howl at the moon. The cold bit through the wool, but she kept her eyes open, watching. By the fourth day he let her ride with him. They rounded cattle down in a dry wash, one steer lame from a mesquite thorn. She moved like she'd done it her whole life, though it had been years since she'd ridden bareback in her uncle's field before the fire took the barn. Cullen watched her with something almost like respect. "Where'd you learn to handle a rope?" he asked as they tied the injured steer. "Same place I learned to stitch and skin," she said. "A man once told me a girl ought to be prepared for a world that doesn't want her alive." He gave a short, dry grunt. Not quite a laugh. They ate lunch in the saddle, salt pork, dry bread. The land around them stretched yellow and sun-baked. Wind carried heat and the smell of dung. Still, there was a kind of peace in it. "You knew my name," he said suddenly. "When you came." She nodded. "You signed the first letter." His jaw worked like he wanted to chew on the silence instead. "My daughter," he said. "She married a man out there. He left her with nothing. She came back sick, wouldn't speak. Just stared through the walls." Clara felt something cold slide down her spine. "I didn't write you for company," he said. I wrote you because I didn't want to die alone out here. That was before she came back. Before I buried her. I didn't come for love, Clara said. I came because I was promised something, and I intend to see it through. They rode back in silence, but that night she slept inside. He didn't send her to the porch. He didn't lock his door. By the 6th day, things changed. A rider came to the house near dusk. Young, dirty, armed, he didn't give a name, just asked if Cullen had seen a drifter named Coates. Cullen said no. But Clara watched the man's eyes, watched the way he looked at the house, the barn, at her. He spat in the dirt before he left. Place won't stand much longer, he said. Old dogs get put down eventually. When he was gone, Cullen stood still for a long time, like he'd been punched and hadn't felt it yet. Who was that? Clara asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned to her, and for the first time she saw fear, not for himself, but for something behind him. Something already coming. Tomorrow she would find out why this land smelled of blood, and why this man had wanted to vanish from the world. But tonight she boiled water, loaded the rifle, and barred the door, just in case. She was still the girl no one wanted, but now she was armed. Before dawn, the dogs howled again. Clara was already up, the rifle propped against the doorframe as she skimmed a hand across the windowsill. The wind had shifted. Dust came in bitter now, not dry, metallic, like rust turned to air. Cullen was outside, already saddling his horse. He moved with purpose but not panic. That made her more uneasy. "You're riding out?" she asked. He didn't look at her. "Scouting water line," trough ran low. Liar, she thought, but said nothing. She followed him to the barn, didn't ask permission. Her hands found the saddle straps before he could stop her. "I'm coming," she said. He didn't argue. Maybe he knew it was easier to let her ride than to fight her off again. Maybe something in him had softened, or maybe he just didn't want to be alone when whatever was coming showed its face. They rode the low ridge trail where the arroyo opened like a scar into the flatlands. She saw signs of recent riders, hoofprints not yet crusted, a lid fresh with rain, the guts of a rabbit shot and left to spoil. Cullen's jaw went tighter with every mile. They reached the north fence by mid-morning. 3 posts had been cut clean, wire uncoiled like a snake. Clara dismounted and touched the splintered edge. It was deliberate. "Why?" she asked. Cullen didn't speak for a long time. When he did, his voice was rougher than the wind. "This land belonged to a man named Latch once. He ran cattle through it before the war. When he died, I bought it cheap, thought it clean. Turns out it was tangled." "Tangled with who?" "His sons," he said. "Mean, drunk bastards. Rode for the Confederacy and never left the war behind. When they came back, found the land sold, they swore they'd take it back piece by piece." "You ever tell the sheriff?" Cullen looked at her then, long and dark. "There is no sheriff in Dustjo. Just men with guns and who they owe." Clara stood, her skirts were damp with dew and burrs. "So what happens now?" "They'll test the fences, burn out the well maybe. Wait till I'm gone or too old to shoot straight. Then they'll come for what's left. And me." He didn't answer that, but she could read the truth in his silence. In Dustjo, a woman wasn't land, wasn't cattle, she was just spoils. That night she cooked beans and salt meat while Cullen oiled the rifles. There were 5. 1 shotgun, short barrel, 1 revolver worn to the handle. The others she'd never fired, but she'd learn. Her hands remembered how to hold steady. Her eyes had never forgotten how to watch for the twitch before a man lied. She found a ledger in the corner of the barn, weather-warped, stained. Inside were names, dates, weights of steers sold and crops failed. But at the back in cramped scrawl were other names. Latch, P-Latch, E-Latch, beneath them threats made, fence cut, 4 sheep poisoned, 1 colt taken. There were tally marks, 23. Clara didn't ask what they counted. She didn't need to. The next day, she cut her skirts to the knee and stole a pair of Cullen's old pants from a chest. They hung loose but stayed tied with cord. She braided her hair tight and stuck a knife in her boot. Cullen said nothing when he saw her, just handed her the Winchester. "Do you believe in fate?" she asked as they saddled up again. "No," he said. "Fate's just what men call it when they run out of ways to blame themselves." She nodded. That was fair. They didn't scout that day. They set traps, posted wire, moved cattle to the south pasture where the scrub was thicker. Clara made her mind work like a map. She traced routes through arroyos, counted paces to the blind slope behind the barn. Every step she took, she felt the girl she'd been get smaller, not weaker, just quieter. A voice fading down a long hallway. The enemy came 2 nights later. They didn't charge, they didn't shout. Just crept up like the wind, soft and steady. A lantern blinked near the fence post. A match flared too close to the barn wall. Clara saw it first. She didn't call for Cullen. She just raised the rifle and fired. The shot cracked the silence in half. Men shouted. Hooves thundered. The lantern fell and smashed. Fire licked up the dry hay but died fast. Cullen had soaked the floor with piss water, a trick from cattle barns back east. One man rushed the porch. Clara fired again, missed. The kick slammed her shoulder back. Cullen shot once. The man fell, rolled, didn't rise. It didn't last more than 3 minutes. When the dust cleared, there were 2 dead at the fence, one wounded in the scrub, crawling. Cullen walked out with the shotgun and put an end to the crawling. Clara did not flinch. When it was done, Cullen sat on the steps and lit a smoke with shaking hands. "You don't have to stay," he said. "You've seen what it is now." She sat beside him, took the smoke from his hand, drew once, coughed hard, but kept it. "I came here because I had no one," she said, "but now I've got a reason." "What reason?" "Vengeance," she said. "And maybe something steadier once the shooting done." Cullen looked at her, and for once there was no scorn in his eyes, no regret. Just a man too tired to lie, sitting beside a woman who'd just proven herself more than decoration. "Latch boys'll come again," he said. "Let them," Clara said. "Next time I'll aim better." The wind blew warm over the blood in the dirt. She didn't look away. Dustjo had given her nothing, so now she would take. The bodies were buried behind the ridge, shallow and quick, without markers. Cullen said nothing during the work, and Clara didn't ask if he knew their names. She assumed he did. Men like that didn't come for strangers. They came to settle debts. Afterward, Cullen burned the shirts they dyed in and poured ash into the fire pit. It was an old way of keeping the dead from speaking back. Clara had seen it before, once when a fever took a boy in the orphan ward and they burned his bedsheets in secret. She didn't sleep that night, sat by the window instead, the rifle across her knees. Her shoulder ached from the shot, her arms bruised from recoil, but she stayed upright. She wasn't afraid, not anymore. But she knew what waited when the sun came up: retaliation. Cullen rose at first light, face drawn and quiet. He brought her coffee in a tin mug and sat without speaking. When she finally looked over, she saw something different in him. Not resignation, not rage, strategy. "They'll send someone to town," he said. "Tell it their way, make it sound like murder." "You think the town'll listen?" "They don't need to, just need an excuse." She nodded, then, after a long moment, "So we hit first." He didn't reply, but he didn't argue. That was enough. They rode to the edge of town before dusk, skirts of the hills casting long shadows. Clara wore a scarf over her braid, dust caked on her boots. They tied their horses a mile out and moved on foot. Cullen carried the shotgun and a revolver tucked under his coat. Clara had the Winchester and a small derringer stuffed in her bodice. Town wasn't much. Just a row of saloons, a general store, a feed station, and a church with its bell long rusted still. No lawmen visible. just hands and drifters leaning on posts, watching everything and saying nothing. Cullen pointed with his chin toward the back of the saloon. Latch kin run dice games out of there. They'll be armed, mean. Clara's fingers curled tighter around the rifle. How many? 3, maybe more. But only one we need. She didn't ask which. She didn't need names to aim. The back door creaked like a threat. Cullen kicked it open and stepped through first. Clara followed, rifle up, heart hammering. The smell inside was smoke and spilled whiskey, blood from the week before still crusted under the card table. 3 men sat at the far end. One stood fast, reaching. Clara fired first. The man went down hard, chest punched open. The table collapsed with him. Someone screamed. A bottle shattered. Cullen moved through the chaos like he'd done it before, shooting clean, 2 down in seconds. The third tried to crawl, wounded in the thigh. Cullen stopped him with a boot. "Name?" he asked. The man spat blood. "Page Latch." "Where's your brother?" The wounded man laughed, teeth red. "Out at Cutter's Bluff, where you won't ride out alive." Clara stepped forward. Her voice was calm. "Tell him Clara's coming." She raised the rifle again. The man's laugh died in his throat. They rode hard out of town, dust trailing behind like smoke. No one followed, not yet. At the ridge above the ranch, Clara stopped her horse and looked out. The cattle were quiet. The wind rolled steady. Nothing yet moved. "You didn't have to shoot," Cullen said behind her. "Yes," she said, "I did." He nodded once, like he understood. Maybe he did. That night they packed supplies, water, ammo, jerky, dry bread, 2 saddlebags full. Clara took her knife and stitched it to her thigh. The air was sharp with storm threat, though no clouds moved. Cullen sat across from her by the hearth, staring at the embers. "You meant what you said," he asked, "about marrying." She didn't flinch. "I did. Even now. Especially now." He stood, came toward her, stopped with space between. "I ain't a man who knows how to love easy." "I don't want easy," she said. "I want true." He nodded again. No ceremony, no ring, just 2 people whose blood had mixed in dust and fire. That was enough. Cutter's Bluff waited the next morning. They rode out before dawn. No words spoken. No goodbyes. Clara had no one left in the world but the man beside her and the ghost she still carried. She would ride into the lion's mouth because she'd rather die reaching for justice than live forgotten. And she would not die easy. The trail to Cutter's Bluff narrowed into shale, thick with snake holes and switchgrass. No trees, just sun-baked rock and the dry breath of the canyon rising like heat off steel. They rode in silence. Clara's hands stayed near the rifle, her eyes ahead. Cullen rode slightly behind, watching their backs. The air felt wrong, too still, too quiet, like the world was holding its breath. By midday, they saw the bluff. It wasn't marked on any map, but Cullen knew it from the war, an old Confederate holdout where deserters had once holed up, built lean-tos into the canyon walls, dug rain pits that still held water long after the creeks had gone dry. Now it served as a hideout for what was left of the Latch boys and their kind, land thieves, deserters, drunkards too proud to die and too mean to change. They camped just shy of the canyon mouth. Clara stripped her coat and cleaned the rifle with slow, measured care. She had no illusions about what waited. She wasn't riding to warn or negotiate or plead. She rode for retribution, and she rode willing. Cullen crouched beside her, tying cartridges into bundles with string. 5 men, maybe 6, he said. One'll be on lookout. They keep a dog big. "Quiet when it kills?" she asked. "Too quiet." She checked her knife, adjusted the ties on her boots. Her fingers were steady. She hadn't slept more than 2 hours and her bones ached from the ride, but inside her, something had sharpened. The girl who once wrote soft letters to a stranger was long gone. Only what was necessary remained. We go at first light, she said. Cullen paused. There's still time to walk away. I could handle it myself. No, she said. I'm not here to be handled. I'm here to finish what started when your letter said I wasn't needed. He met her eyes then, no pride, no sorrow, just quiet acceptance. They didn't speak again that night. Dawn came brittle and gray. The canyon swallowed the light in long shadows. They left the horses behind and moved on foot, silent, slow. Clara led the way now. Cullen had the shotgun. She carried the rifle close, finger ready. They reached the first outcrop where the lookouts roosted. A boy, barely older than 15, sat picking at his teeth with a pocket knife. He never heard her coming. The blade slid in beneath his chin. His eyes widened. She twisted once. He slumped without sound. Cullen dragged the body into the brush. They moved on. The camp sat sunken in a stone bowl dug into the bluff wall. Smoke curled from a cook fire. 4 men milled about, one chopping kindling, 2 sitting over cards, one oiling a revolver. The dog lay chained to a post, ears twitching but eyes shut. "Which is Latch?" she whispered. "Big one, red shirt." She nodded. They flanked wide, Clara moving left, Cullen right. She took position above, sighted down the rifle. The red-shirted man turned toward the fire, laughing at something. She squeezed the trigger. His head snapped back, blood misting the fire. Before the others could move, Cullen opened up with the shotgun. One man dropped, guts opened across the dirt. Another scrambled for cover, firing wild. The last dove into the tent came up with a pistol. Clara climbed down fast, eyes locked. The dog howled, strained at the chain. Gunfire cracked again, Cullen cursed. Clara hit the dirt and fired. The tent shredded. A man screamed, dropped his gun, staggered toward her. She met him with the rifle butt, once, twice. He stopped moving. Silence returned. Only the dog's chain clinked now, and even that slowed. Clara walked the camp, checked the bodies. 4 dead, 1 missing, the kindling man. She found him crawling toward a pack mule, blood running from a leg wound. He looked up, terrified. "Please, please, I wasn't." She raised the rifle. "Don't," Cullen said behind her. "He's done." Clara looked at the man. Saw the coward in him, not the threat. She lowered the gun, stepped back. Cullen stepped forward. "You tell the rest. Dustjo's ours now. Come back and we burn your name from the stone." The man nodded, sobbing, crawled into the brush. They left the canyon as smoke rose behind them. Cullen didn't speak. Neither did she. There was no glory in it, no triumph, just survival, just a quiet kind of justice. At the ridge, she stopped and looked back. "Was it enough?" Cullen asked. Clara shook her head slowly. "Enough's a word men use to pretend something. Over." He stepped closer. "And is it?" She didn't answer. The wind carried dust across the horizon, thin and pale like smoke from an old fire. She won what she came for, but she hadn't come only for blood, not really. She'd come to be someone who could never be sent away again, and that part wasn't finished yet. They rode back slow. Not from weariness, but from something else, a kind of reckoning. The horses moved steady beneath them, their shadows stretched long across the red clay and dead grass. Clara felt every hoofbeat settle into her bones like a rhythm she'd always known, but never been allowed to follow. Cullen kept to her side now, not ahead, not behind. As they neared the ranch, he spoke. "There's still the town," he said, "still men there who might come." Clara nodded. "Let them." It wasn't bravado, just truth. The porch boards creaked when she stepped onto them again, familiar now, hers. The door opened without a sound. Inside, the fire was out and dust lay thin across the table, but the house felt changed. Not by time, but by the choice to return. Cullen unsaddled the horses while she boiled water. She stripped her bloodstiff shirt in the kitchen, bathed with a cloth, silent. Her bruises were purple across the ribs, her right shoulder swollen from the rifle's kick, but she kept moving. A woman who had earned every mark on her. When she stepped out again, he was there on the porch, watching the sky. She stood beside him, eyes tracking the trail in the distance. "You want a preacher?" he asked. "No. You want a ring. I want a name." He turned to face her. "Then take it." She nodded once. That was enough. They buried the old ledger that night, out back by the mesquite tree where his daughter lay. Clara placed it deep, where the words could rot. The names inside it belonged to the past. She had no use for record-keeping now, no more counting. No more owing. The next week men came from town, 3 of them, all armed, all cautious. Clara watched from the porch as Cullen stepped out to meet them. "We heard about Cutter's Bluff," the lead man said. "We heard your woman was there." Cullen's face didn't move. "She's my wife." One of them spit in the dirt. "That's so." Cullen's hand stayed near the shotgun. "You want to press it." The man looked past him, saw Clara watching, saw the cold steel in her hands and her eyes. He shook his head. "No, sir," he said, "just passing news." They turned and rode back the way they came. Afterward, Cullen sat on the steps, breath shallow. "You didn't flinch," he said. "I don't flinch for ghosts," she replied. They planted new beans that spring. The rains came late, but they came. Clara broke the ground herself, hands blistered and black with soil. The cattle multiplied, the fence held. One morning, Cullen stood at the edge of the field and looked out at the hills. She joined him. "I thought I was buying a wife," he said. "You were." He glanced at her, didn't know I was getting a partner. She smiled the way a scar does when it catches light. "Didn't know I was becoming one." He reached for her hand. Calloused fingers met calloused fingers. In Dust Joe, the wind still carried dust, and the sun still punished those who came unready, but the house stood. The land fed them. And no one sent Clara away again, not because she begged, because she stayed, because she fought, because she became what no one thought a discarded woman could be, and they called her Clara Cullen after that, not as property, but as warning.